the phones will have NFC chips, but retailers will have to install NFC readers as well. And it's not yet clear what the reason or what the important push is for retailers to do that. So for me, right now, NFC is a solution looking for a problem.
So next question is, as an entrepreneur, so most of the companies, that is startup companies, which have potential market, they are acquired by the big companies, either by hostile takeover or by friendly takeover. Is it really possible for a startup companies to compete the big guys, big boys there?
Ever heard of Facebook?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, I heard that Google has given an offer to Facebook that turned down, and recently Andrew Masson of Groupon also got it.
Yeah. So there are many startups that don't get acquired but go on. Every big company was a startup once.
Yeah, of course.
Right, and
But is there any strategy to compete? A startup can compete against a big guy.
It all has to do with finding. You have to be really lucky, and you have to find a space that where there's explosive growth. And the startups that become really big companies are startups that happen to be in spaces that they're sort of creating a new space. They're not sort of competing in an existing space. Like Facebook created something new. They were not competing in search or something, right? So to create a new space, and that space has to become a big space. Then you become a big player, independent player.
Thank you very much, sir.
Sure.
Hey, Anand. I had a question on this entire data explosion. I was curious that you didn't mention Alvin Toffler, who I think wrote in the 1990s about the information explosion and what would happen. I think some of his work would have been great. The other question I have is, India today is exploding with about 1.2 billion people. Most of the services that we talk about right now are going to actually take away people in terms of their work. So the productivity is going to go up, and number of people on the road will be higher. In the US, traditionally the service is expensive, and therefore you're able to kind of use these disruptive technologies to take it forward. So what do you think there will be an inflection point that countries with large population will reach when technology will take over and there are too many people without jobs on the road?
Great. So first question is Alvin Toffler. I mean, great. I think if he said the same thing, more power to him, right? So the second question is on productivity. So it's not clear. I think technology takes away certain kinds of tasks that are automatable, right? People are good at some things that technology is not good at, and I think it's wrong to see technology as taking away jobs. That's kind of I think an outdated way of looking at things. I think technology creates new opportunities, and people move up the value chain and do more interesting things. And the less interesting things are better done by machines than by people. It's this has been the case for the past 300 years, right? So ever since the steam engine came around, right? So.
Rana, first of all, thanks for an amazingly inspiring and entertaining talk. You were at Bangalore recently for the NASSCOM event as well. So my question is around product startups out of India, right? So you have two categories of product startups in India right now. One which are looking at the Indian opportunity, but keeping that aside for a moment, you also have a whole crop of Indian startups looking at targeting the global opportunity, primarily the US market. While theoretically it is feasible to start various kinds of startups anywhere in the world, when theoretically Cosmix could have been started in India as well, we're still struggling to see that product success story out of India that has made it big in the US market and globally. What's your view on that, on global product companies out of India? And on a related note, do you think you could have done a Cosmix out of India?
Actually, excellent question. I think we will increasingly see more interesting companies out of India. For example, many of you may have heard about this company called InMobi, right? They're based out of India. They're targeting a global market. So there will be more and more companies like this that gets. And the internet makes this easier, right? If you're delivering a service that's deliverable entirely over the internet, over the web, without requiring a physical presence, then it's easier to, I think, start companies in India. The only thing that, the reason why this has been a challenge so far has been that the markets have always been in the West, right? And you have to be close to the market to develop a good product. You might have great technology, but you have to understand the market. But I think people in India, or entrepreneurs in India, are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and India itself is becoming an interesting market. One of the side effects of India being an interesting market in itself is that you can bootstrap a company with the Indian market, and then you can go for the global market. I think you'll see that happening more and more. The reason why I think most interesting companies come out of the US is because the US is a large domestic market. So as an entrepreneur, you can study the domestic market with which you are very familiar, you can develop the product, and then you can take it across the world. Right? So you need the domestic market to be able to go take on the world market. And I think India is becoming an interesting enough domestic market now that you can start a company, target the Indian market, and then take it global. So I think that's definitely possible.
My questions are related to the funding part of all startups. I mean, there are VCs around in India, but have they still caught up with the idea of funding online startups, and especially for student-based startups?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I was in fact just prior to this, I was just talking with Professor Nagarajan and various others at the Office of Alumni Affairs, and they were talking about how students have ideas, but it's hard to get that initial funding to test that idea. I think there needs to be some. I think that's definitely a gap in India right now. I think there needs to be something like the equivalent of an incubator or something that can take student ideas. Like, for example, we were discussing C5, where interesting product ideas come out of here at IIT Madras, and those offer an opportunity for those students, those teams, to spend a year developing their product and trying to get that off the ground. So I think that's definitely there's a gap there that needs to be addressed, and it's I'm happy to work with IIT Madras, and we were discussing ways to see whether providing both mentorship as well as capital.
Yeah. My question is, we see a lot of startups based on internet, electronics, and mostly the internet sector. How are the startups in other sectors like infrastructure or mechanical engineering or civil? Because I'm from a mechanical background, and I have really I want to be an entrepreneur, but yeah, it's all IT and coding and stuff, so I have no clue about that.
It's a good, it's a terrific question. I'm not a mechanical engineer, right? So but the reason why I think the internet has been a good place for startups is that it's been possible for people to develop initial products at low cost without investing huge amounts of capital, and sort of get the product out there and get adoption without actually, manufacturing takes capital, much more capital than the internet does. And I think that's been one of the primary reasons. And the distribution is much easier online. Once you have an online product, millions of people can use it, right? Whereas it's much harder. The physical distribution is much harder, right? So I think that's an interesting. But one of the interesting things that we are seeing now is, and we are seeing this with Apple as well, right? People, we are seeing products that are, integrated devices that combine the hardware and the software and the design aesthetics and so on. And I think this will, happen it's happened in phones. It can happen in other areas as well. I don't know specifically about mechanical engineering, so that's harder for me to say.
See, I was using Cosmix. Now, one fine day I go to cosmix.com, I find Walmart slap and your picture there. But I'm still missing that search. That's question one. So is there any possibility of getting that for users? The second question is about Cosmix's this thing itself. See, if you were to search on a problem on health or something, the results is mind blowing. Like I can, any problem, let's say put something like lipodystrophy or psoriasis or something, then it's enough to read what you guys give. But the same doesn't hold good for some other searches. If I search on something else, say spirituality, you pick a few things from Google, a few from answers.com, and it's just a sort of collage.
Right.
So, I mean, what's the difficulty in applying that to a general search? So that's question 2. Question 3 is, what is the difference between cosmics and say things like Wolfram Alpha? Like if I type in something on Wolfram Alpha, then I get the date of birth, or if it's a molecule, I get the complete stuff. But by and large, what I get from Wolfram Alpha is not that useful. Apart from this, some of the unique things which is not available in any other thing. They say compute facts. So, but by and large, like if you were to do a general search, Wolfram Alpha is not going to give you anything. Is it possible for explaining that in a sort of easy way to understand the differences?
Okay. Let's start with the first question. Unfortunately, Cosmics doesn't exist as a company anymore, so that search is no longer available. But I'm told that Google, for instance, has been looking at Cosmics, and they're coming out with some of the features that we had in Cosmics are going to be available in Google. So you just have to wait for some time, and I'm sure it will be available in other search engines, Google and Bing and so on. The question that you raised, right, is that at Cosmics we spent a lot of time making sure that the health search really worked well. We built a site called Right Health. We were the #2 health website worldwide, and so health was a really good sector. The problem is in making building a new search engine from scratch, as we discovered, is twofold. One, building a new search engine requires a lot of capital. It's a high capital intensive investment business, because you have to crawl the web, which is growing day by day, and you have to keep it up to date, and you have to serve millions of users, which turns out to be highly capital intensive in the servers and networking equipment and so on. So it's hard for a startup to compete with Google and Microsoft in search because of the capital requirements. That's one of the reasons why building a new search engine is hard. It's a high barrier to entry because of that. And the other thing that we found is that people are very used to going to a certain place for their search, whether it's Google or Bing, and they don't really want to change their search behavior. So that's one of the reasons why we decided that even if you had a better search engine, people are not going to come to you. So we took this technology that we developed for search and we applied it to social media. So that was the pivot that I talked about. So the first thing we did at Cosmics was we built a better search engine. We realized people are not using it. So we took the same technology and we applied it to social media. This new data that's coming from social media, and we used it to analyze people's interests and so on. And that turned out to be much more helpful and ended up with the acquisition by Walmart. Wolfram Alpha, I know I can't really comment on that. I'm not a big user of Wolfram Alpha. I actually don't. I'm not. In terms of technology, Wolfram is apparently built on Mathematica, which is a software that Stephen Wolfram came up with, right? And it uses some kind of math. It's very good for, I think, math problems. If you want to figure out what integral secant cube x dx is or something like that, I think it's a really good. It's a really good solution. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, my question is that you talked about data. There is no doubt there is a massive data over the net, but all the data is not true. Or you can say that whenever people put in social media, they put something that other people will like, not what they really think. So how the marketer or how the company should take that data? What is the distinguish? What is the main information to get, or what is the data? There is a difference between data and information.
Right. What you raise is a very good point, right? Not everything you read is true, obviously, right? So, one of the things that when you have a lot of data, you can't trust all of it. So you have to use statistical techniques to separate out what is reliable from what is not, and that's one of the unsolved research problems in this space. So the answer, my answer to you is that what you raise is a very, very good question, and it's a open and unsolved research problem, and there'll be hundreds of people doing PhDs on this topic.
My question is regarding the thought where you had where startups start off with the Indian base and then move on to the crowds in the West. I mean, I believe in that because we have enough numbers here. A question regarding what you think about the domain.in. I mean, from a startup point of view, I mean, just basic advice I wanted from you. I mean, from a startup point of view, .com is very expensive. So do you still think a .in has enough power to carry you forward as a startup and give you enough visibility?
You know, my point of view on this has changed. I used to think that you need to get .com, or it was at the end of the world. This was a few years ago. But of late, we are seeing many more non.com domains gaining traction. For example, you know, there's Bitly, which is a .ly domain, right? And there's many more of these non.com domains that are actually gaining traction right now. There are, I think, a few Indian companies that are also using the .in domain. I think. We also have moved to a world where more people actually find sites by typing them into Google, right? So rather than typing them into the address bar. So I think the relevance of the .com has diminished somewhat. It's less important than it used to be. I think we are moving in a direction where the domain is kind of less important.
Hi, I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of related to one of the earlier questions.
Okay.
It's related to this privacy aspect of the data that is available. Till now, people were not that serious about the privacy aspect, but slowly, I mean, we have seen that Facebook has been introducing newer features that let you control how much data is visible publicly and all that.
Yep.
So on one hand, we have this thing that the available data has been growing exponentially. But next thing is, like, due to these privacy requirements, will it happen that the data that is actually available for analysis, any chance that that is going to shrink rather than increase?
That's a good question. I actually think that the amount of data will continues to increase independent of, that's a secular trend, right? For example, it's growing so fast that things like privacy, while they are a concern, they're not going to slow down the growth in the amount of data. The privacy issue is a good one, and overall, I think companies, and we are working on this as well, need to come up with a way to get the consent of users before you analyze their data. And as a matter of principle, we only analyze either data that's completely public or data where we have the consent of the user. So that's what we do, right? And more, and that's kind of the way forward, I think. And even if you sort of restrict it to that domain, the growth in data is huge still.
No, but for example, Walmart now tries to access the Facebook data, okay? Unless you have some arrangement with Facebook.
No, actually, we don't have the arrangement with Facebook.
Yeah.
We have the arrangement with the user. See, okay. The way you access Facebook data is by getting the user to install a Facebook app. When the user installs the Facebook app, there's a permissions dialog that comes up. And the permissions dialog says, we will be using your data for this purpose, do you give us permission? And the user says yes or no. And that's how we get access to the data. So the contract is directly with the end user.
Okay.
Make
Thanks.
sense?
Good evening, sir. I want to know, after Jungly and Cosmic, what is next?
I don't know. I'll recover the name. No, seriously, I'm working on Walmart Labs right now, which I think we are in this unique position where I think shopping is changing, when shopping is such a fundamental human activity that when it changes and you're part of defining that change, and it's a very nice position to be in. So I'm sort of enjoying doing what I'm doing right now. I'll think about what to do next. After I revolutionize shopping or something like this.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, what is the major challenge for sustainability of a startup?
That's a very open-ended question, right? I think in general, I think the most important thing for a startup is customers, right? You should have customers, then everything else will follow.
Good evening, Anand. My name is Prasanna. I'm not a student. I'm from G Energy. I have two questions for you. I know you're a lot of talking about data mining. Even from the Google and Amazon and your projects, everything on the data. I understand the business is, everything depends on that trend, on that situation, on that period. That is the way Google has differently come up with that one. So I do understand about the computer science and IT is not only the data, there are so many sectors. So the very important point for the business is sensing the trend, how it is going. So like the data mining is for past 10, 20 years. So suppose if you are coming out of the university and now, what do you think will be the next trend or next major in computer field?
Well, you know, I'm not sure I understood your question fully, but if your question is how do you spot new trends? If that is that your question?
Yes, apart from data mining, data.
The only way to spot trends is, you know, there's two ways to spot trends, right? One is like, actually three. One is to be incredibly lucky, right? Just guess and you'll be right, right? The second is to have like some kind of huge intuition that about the future, and there are very few people in the world who have it, like Steve Jobs, right? And he's no longer with us. So the third is data, right? So you have to look at data and you have to analyze it, and you have to, you know, that's the surest way of predicting trends is to sort of look at data and see what's going on there. I will give you an example, right? How many people here have heard of something called cake pops? Nobody, okay. So a cake pop is a cross between a cake and a lollipop, right? You take a cake on a stick and you get a cake pop, right? And you know, that's exactly my reaction. You know, why is this interesting, right? So it turns out, and when we were doing this analytics on social media, we saw that suddenly a lot of people are saying, hey, I love cake pops. And as a result of this, we are going to be carrying cake pop makers at Walmart. Right? So we spotted a trend entirely through looking at data on Twitter and Facebook and seeing people love cake pops, and now we're going to be carrying that, right? So a lot of times, you know, trends are either guesswork or data. Those are the only two ways.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, since I'm a GE Energy, maybe I don't know if you're responsible for this one or not. Being a senior president and vice president in Walmart. As you said, the trend is going on as the data more and more are growing. Of course, we also, I understand it's a business. Apart from this, there is a social factor, environmental factor also comes. So the data grows and also data servers are also going. I hope you heard about a lot of servers, it's making the global warming. Do you have any strategy for that? How you handle in future as a...
You know, I don't think this question is specific to Walmart, right? I think the computer industry as a whole is working on coming up with ways of more energy efficient servers and so on. So that's a big thing that's happening in the computer industry. And I hope some of the people here who are working in computer engineering are working on problems like that, how to come up with more energy efficient servers. So that, I think it's a very important problem.
Sir.
Okay, so I'll repeat the question. The question is, you know, given that I work for both a startup and a big company, what's the difference in experience in working for the two? I think the difference largely has to do with, at a startup, you can focus on one thing with laser-like focus and you can get it done. And because you have a small team, you can make fast decisions. The problem with most big companies, the good thing with big companies is that they have a lot more resources. The bad thing about big companies is that they take a lot longer to make decisions, right? So I think those are kind of the trade-offs. I've spent more of my life at startups than big companies.
Okay, we're running out of time. Just last couple of questions.
Okay, last two questions.
Sir, how do you think the Indian market will progress towards e-commerce industry? For example, you talked about people having smartphones, and I saw an ad of a Korean company where people, where the shopping complex actually put up posters in the metro stations and places where people could just use their smartphones, scan the barcode and order a particular thing. That thing works well in the Korean market or something, but in India, let's say, for for that particular business to work well, you are assuming that people are very busy and they don't have time to go to shopping complexes. So how does that translate into the Indian market? Because I mean, we can see people are free and they might go to shopping complexes and they love going to shopping complexes. So how do you feel about?
You know, this is why I sort of don't believe that there is this dichotomy between e-commerce and going to shopping complexes. I think both will coexist, right? And they will sort of feed off each other. There are some kinds of products for which going to the shopping, and it is a pleasurable experience to go to the shopping complex. On the other hand, I think one of the things that we are realizing in India, and you know, how many of you have used Flipkart? So there's your answer on e-commerce, right? So there are certain, why do you not go to the bookstore? Why do you use Flipkart?
That's different.
Why?
Because, like, for example, shopping complex.
There you go. So there's always three reasons, okay, in shopping. One is assortment, having the largest set of products, right? If there is a specific product that you want, okay, and it's not, you will go where it's available. The problem with physical shopping is that when you have a bricks and mortar store, there's only so many products you can carry. Whereas when you have an online store, you can carry a much larger selection of products because you're not paying real estate costs, right? So this is the reason why online commerce, when the amount of the product selection that customers need or demand expands, you necessarily have to move online. You cannot be offline. So that's the biggest. One of the bigger reasons people order online is that they just can't find the product in their neighborhood, right? Yeah.
You sell off your both the startups, as in why not continue with the same gen?
So in both cases, right? The interesting thing is, you know, my personal motivation in doing companies is not so much that I want to run a company, but what really excites me is building something that millions of people will use, right? I mean, that's kind of what gets me going. I want to build something that millions and millions of people use and they find really useful. And in both cases, with Junglee and Amazon and with Cosmics at Walmart, these acquisitions give us access to millions and millions of customers who will use what we have developed, right? So I think that's the real reason why I ended up, it's the shortest path to getting millions and millions of users. Last question.
I haven't seen, I don't really know how people at Stanford are or in the US are, but I get the feeling that people over here are risk averse and they won't really take that risk taking appetite is less. Is it just because there are, I look at undergrads, fellow undergrads also, and whenever we hear about Google and Facebook, there are postgrad dropouts also. So is there a difference in the risk taking appetite in the Indian
You know, they might well be. I mean, undergrad dropouts, Facebook, right? Facebook is an undergrad dropout. Steve Jobs is an undergrad dropout, right? So it's not that there is any lack of great companies started by undergrad dropouts. Not that I'm encouraging any of you to drop out, unless you have a great idea. So I think it has to do with having some role models and having mentors and sort of the whole interest. Even when we were post-grad dropouts in Silicon Valley, right, which is supposed to be the mecca for starting these startups, we found it tough, right? So the first few always have it tough, right? Because they're the trailblazers, and then that paves the path for the rest. So somebody has to blaze the trail. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your entrepreneurial journey with us. I'm sure you've inspired many among us to become entrepreneurs, hopefully without dropping out. It was indeed a pleasure having you here. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. As a token of appreciation, I would like Professor Tillai Rajan to present you with a memento. With that, we wrap up this edition of The Mills. We hope you enjoyed it. A big thank you to the audience for being very engaging. Please help yourself to the snacks outside and have a great evening ahead.